Greetings everyone. This is Dr. Kavya Rachana Chaturasi, intern from MNR Dental College. In this presentation, I want to discuss about head and neck space infections under these subheadings. So, starting with the classification, this classification is mainly according to the involvement of the spaces. That includes primary maxillary spaces, which includes canine, that is intraorbital space, buccal space, infratemporal space, and next is the primary mandibular spaces, which includes the submental space, submandibular space, sublingual space, and buccal space. Next is the secondary facial spaces, that includes the mesenteric space, pterygomandibular space, superficial and deep temporal space, lateral pharyngeal space, retropharyngeal space, and prevertebral space. So this is a picture showing the location of different facial spaces. Here is the retropharyngeal space, lateral pharyngeal space, mesenteric space, pterygomandibular space, sublingual space, submandibular space, submental space. So this picture shows different anatomical position of different facial spaces in different aspects. Now coming to the submandibular space. So submandibular space infections are mainly from the infections of the mandibular molars, most commonly second and third molars. So the infection comes from the mandibular molars, and it penetrates the thin lingual plate and directly passes into the submandibular space, leading to the submandibular space infection. The clinical features of this submandibular space infection is presented as the swelling is seen over the lower border of the mandible and extending till the level of the hyoid bone in a shape of the inverted cone. So there is a swelling over the lower border of the mandible and extending till the level of the hyoid bone. And coming to the surgical management, in this surgical management, the 2 stab incisions are given and made at the inferior aspect of the swelling, and the thin rubber drain is passed through the stab incisions with the help of hemostat, and the drainage is done. So this drain and the ends of the drain is sutured to prevent the dislodgement. So this is about the submandibular space infection. Now coming to the submental space infection, these submental space infections are caused due to the infection from the lower incisors, lower lip, chin, and tip of the tongue, and also anterior part of the floor of the mouth can spread to the submental lymph nodes and subsequently cause the submental space infection. So if there is an infected lower incisors, the infection passes from the periapical space of those lower incisors, and the infection is spreads to the submental space, leading to the submental space infection. Right. And next, coming to the clinical features, the swelling is often confined to the region of the chin and the region just beneath it. So here is the swelling below the chin. The surgical management, simple incision and drainage. Next, coming to the sublingual space. Sublingual space infections, often these infections are usually arise from the mandibular premolar region or molar region, or any trauma to this region can lead to the sublingual space infections, and infections which take the root on the lingual aspect of the mandible at the point above the origin. So here it is a submylohyoid muscle. Any infection that is above the origin of this mylohyoid muscle will end up in the sublingual space, leading to the sublingual space infection. So this is how sublingual space infection occurs. Next, coming to the Clinical features. The swelling is seen on the anterior part of the floor of the mouth, and often the tongue is elevated, so that leading to, see here we can see the swelling in the anterior part of the floor of the mouth, and the tongue is elevated, leading to the difficulty in swallowing and difficulty in respiration, and this is extremely painful. Coming to the most important aspect of a space infection is Ludwig's angina. So Ludwig's angina is a form of a firm, acute, toxic and severe diffuse cellulitis that spreads rapidly bilaterally, affecting submandibular, sublingual and submental spaces. So mainly this is a form of cellulitis that mainly affects the submandibular, sublingual and submental spaces. So as we all know, Ludwig's angina, it is often occurs as a consequence of any dental origin. It is commonly of dental origin. So as we know, oral cavity has a mixed flora and streptococci. These microorganisms are commonly reported in the Ludwig's angina. So presence of staphylococci, E. coli, Pseudomonas and anaerobes including bacteroids, Peptostreptococcus prevotella species have also been isolated. So along with this streptococci, all this microflora is also seen in this kind of infection. So coming to the etiology, just now we have discussed that Ludwig's angina is mainly due to dental origin. So that is mostly of dental extraction. 90% of cases that the Ludwig's angina occurs as a consequence of any dental extraction, either primarily of dental infection, or post extraction phenomena. So it is generally of dental origin following the infection of second and third mandibular molars. 70 to 80% of cases it is following the infection of second and third mandibular molars. So the roots of these teeth often spread below the crest of the mylohyoid muscle, leading to the periapical infection that reaches the this mylohyoid muscle. This periapical infection reaches submandibular space, and from here bilateral to the submandibular, submental and sublingual spaces. So this is how the the infection is caused due to dental origin. Next, the other causative factors include compound mandibular fractures, oral soft tissue lacerations, puncture wounds of floor of the mouth, submandibular sialadenitis, or any secondary infections of the oral malignancies. There is a term called pseudo-Ludwig's angina or pseudo-Ludwig's phenomenon. This is all applied to cases of non-dental origin. Apart from in dental origin, that is infection from infection from the mandibular molars. Apart from the dental origin, other infections like pharyngeal infection or tonsillitis. So this is the etiology of Ludwig's angina. Next, coming to the clinical features, this Ludwig's angina presents with bilateral suprahyoid hard cardboard-like or wood-like swelling is observed, which is often non-fluctuating and painful on palpation. There is always open a mouth due to the edema of the sublingual tissues, and due to which, as there is edema of the sublingual tissues, there is a raised tongue which is of restricted movements along with the enlargement of the tongue. The tongue is raised, enlarged and the movements are restricted. So this leads to difficulty as the tongue is enlarged. That leads to difficulty in swallowing and breathing. It also presents with chills, fever, and increased salivation. This Ludwig's angina early presentation has no suppuration, but it occurs later in the course of disease, and further this phenomenon appears very rapidly and does not respect any anatomic barrier. So first initially there is no suppuration, but later the spread is very rapid, and it presents with a firm brawny swelling in bilateral submandibular and submental regions that is non-fluctuant, tender, and with ill-defined borders. The bilateral mandibular and submandibular swellings are with ill-defined borders. And there is a backward spreading of the infection that leads to the edema of the glottis. This further leads to the obstruction of the airway. So this edema of glottis will lead to obstruction of airway and also shallow breathing. So this is how these are the clinical features of Ludwig's angina. So this is a picture depicting the clinical presentation of Ludwig's angina. See here, there is a open mouth, enlarged tongue and raised tongue, and swelling of the submandibular, submental lymph nodes, and there is appearance of double chin. So this is how a Ludwig's angina looks. Next, coming to the diagnosis is often made on the clinical findings, like we have seen the swellings, bilateral swellings. So those are the mainly diagnosis is mainly based on the clinical findings. That's the CT scan can help to determine the extent of the infection. If there is any abscess, and in order to find out the extent of infection, CT scan can be used. Coming to the treatment, so in Ludwig's angina there is the obstruction of the airway. So this obstruction of airway can be life threatening. So hence the airway clearance have to be done first and foremost. This may require tracheostomy. Next, the treatment must be vigorous and initiated early with the administration of antibiotics. So there can be a prophylactic incision and drainages of the spaces involved. Then coming to the surgical management, often it is done bilateral drainage of the submandibular spaces along with drainage of sublingual and submental spaces is recommended, but it is preferable to drain sublingual and submental spaces separately to avoid the perforation of mylohyoid muscle. So in order to avoid any perforation to this muscle, sublingual and submental spaces are drained separately. So this is about the surgical management. So here it is a case showing Ludwig's angina. So here we can see there is an infection of second and third grossly decayed left mandibular second and third molars. Then there is a blunt dissection into both submandibular and submental spaces, breaking the pus locules. Here is active pus discharge, and here is a removal of the source of infection. That is, the second and third molars are removed, which are the main source of infection for this Ludwig's angina. Then there is a through drainage. there is a through and through drain placed connecting both submental and submandibular spaces, and later the irrigation using two-way drain is done. So this is how a Ludwig's angina case is treated. Next, adding a note on complications. This Ludwig's angina is a potentially serious infection that can lead to septicemia and sometimes septicemia and upper respiratory airway obstruction and provoke edema of epiglottis. So on other hand, it can also spread to the parapharyngeal spaces, and from there it can proceed to the mediastinum, which causes mediastinitis, and later producing the thoracic empyema. Aspiration pneumonia, meningitis and vascular erosion have been cited as the possible complications. The most common cause of mortality is acute obstruction of airways. Acute obstruction of the airways is the most common cause of the mortality. The other complications include cavernous sinus thrombosis, cerebral abscess, and necrotizing fasciitis of head and neck. So these are the potential complications of the Ludwig's angina. So done with Ludwig's angina. Then coming to the lateral pharyngeal space infection. This lateral pharyngeal space infection may be infected from the abscess from the mandibular third molar area or from any tonsillar abscess. So lateral pharyngeal space may be infected from the abscess extending backward from the mandibular third molar area, and more commonly one passing laterally from the tonsillar abscess. This infection can also spread backwards from the sublingual, submandibular and pterygomandibular space infection. So this pterygomandibular space infection is also due to any infection from the mandibular third molar region, especially from the pericoronitis. So any pericoronitis involving the third molar, that infection can lead to pterygomandibular space infection. So this lateral pharyngeal space can also get infected through this pterygomandibular space infection. Then coming to the clinical features, the four cardinal signs of lateral pharyngeal abscess are trismus, induration and swelling of the angle of jaw, fever and pharyngeal bulging. So trismus, induration, swelling of angle of the jaw, fever and pharyngeal bulging are the four important cardinal signs of lateral pharyngeal abscess. Then it also presents with severe pain on affected side of the throat and dysphagia are present. So severe pain and dysphagia on the affected side. Then the tonsil and tonsillar pillar and uvula are seen to be displaced to the medial side. So tonsil, tonsillar pillar along with uvula are seen displaced to the medial side. Then the another most important clinical feature is there on rotation of neck away from the side of the swelling causes severe pain, that is due to tension on the ipsilateral sternocleidomastoid muscle. Sternocleidomastoid muscle. So this severe pain or rotation of neck away from side of swelling is due to tension on sternocleidomastoid muscle. So this is how a lateral pharyngeal space presents. Then coming to the surgical management, there are multiple approaches. To lateral pharyngeal spaces, that is intraoral, extraoral, or the combination of both. In the intraoral, this intraoral incision can be either transpharyngeal or lateral, but this transpharyngeal approach is made through tonsillar fossa, but this approach is not recommended since adequate drainage is very difficult. Drainage is very difficult to obtain. So intraoral incision through tonsillar fossa is not recommended since adequate drainage is very difficult to obtain. So another intraoral approach, which is more easily performed, making an incision between the ramus and medial pterygoid. This is the easiest intraoral approach in managing the lateral pharyngeal space infection. Then coming to the extraoral approach, this extraoral submandibular incision is the safest approach, and this is the safest approach wherein which the incision is made anterior and inferior to the angle of the mandible. So in this extraoral submandibular approach, the incision is made anterior and inferior to the angle of the mandible. So, and coming to the combined approach, this combined approach in combined intraoral and extraoral approach, the lateral mucosal incision is made which offers direct access into the lateral pharyngeal space and aids in the correct placement of the external incision in a swollen face. So in this combined approach, a lateral mucosal incision is made which aids in direct access into the lateral pharyngeal space. So and later a drain is inserted, sutured, and the wound margins allowed to later a drain is inserted and sutured to the wound margin, which allows the drainage. So this is how lateral pharyngeal space infection is managed. Then adding a note to the complications, the complications of lateral pharyngeal abscess include septic jugular thrombophlebitis and carotid artery erosion. These infections have a potential to spread upwards, causing cavernous sinus thrombosis, meningitis, and brain abscess. So these lateral pharyngeal space infections often have a potential spread upwards, causing the cavernous sinus thrombosis, meningitis, and brain abscess. They can also spread into the retropharyngeal space. These lateral pharyngeal space infection can also spread to the retropharyngeal space. So this is about lateral pharyngeal. Next, coming to the retropharyngeal space. Just now we have learned that the lateral pharyngeal abscess can spread into the retropharyngeal space. So this is in most of the cases, retropharyngeal spaces abscess will result from an extension of the lateral pharyngeal space infection. So this is a retropharyngeal abscess. Then coming to the clinical features, retropharyngeal space infection presents with pain, fever, stiffness of neck, dyspnea, drooling, and dysphagia. of dysphagia. Okay, and now the this retropharyngeal space infection presents with fever, pain, fever, stiffness of neck, dyspnea, drooling, and dysphagia. The bulging of posterior pharyngeal wall is often more prominent on one side of the there is a bulging of the posterior pharyngeal wall on one side. Then coming to the complications, this retropharyngeal abscess should be considered as the most dangerous deep neck space abscess, because the complications include supraglottic edema, which often leads to airway obstruction. So there is a complication of supraglottic edema with airway obstruction and aspiration pneumonia due to the rupture of the abscess and acute mediastinitis. So this mediastinitis is the most feared complication that may result in empyema or pericardial effusion. This if the infection perforates extends down to the entire mediastinum to the level of diaphragm. This is a mediastinum is the most feared complication, and if the infection is spreading downwards, extending downwards to the entire mediastinum to the level of the diaphragm, and this condition is characterized by chest pain and dyspnea. We already discussed this. Dyspnea is a clinical presentation, and when the infection spreads down to the level of diaphragm, there is a chest pain is seen. So these are the complications of retropharyngeal space. Now coming to surgical management. So we have already known that this retropharyngeal space abscess will result from the lateral pharyngeal space infection, right? So this so that is the reason why it will not be drained independently, as it is an extension of the lateral pharyngeal space infection. This cannot be drained independently. So in conditions where independent drainage is necessary, an intraoral approach is made, wherein a vertical incision is made on the pharyngeal wall lateral to the midline using a hemostat, and abscess cavity is opened by blunt dissection. So vertical incision is made on the pharyngeal wall lateral to the midline using a hemostat, and the abscess cavity is opened by blunt dissection while the patient is in Trendelenburg position. The patient is in Trendelenburg position in order to avoid aspiration of pus. So the patient is in Trendelenburg position in order to avoid the aspiration of the pus. So next coming to the where if in conditions where independent drainage is necessary, intraoral approach is done. In case of concern about the rupture of the abscess, an extraoral approach is used for the drainage. So in this extraoral approach, incision is made along the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, which is inferior to the hyoid bone, and so the incision is made along the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle inferior to the hyoid bone, and later this muscle and carotid sheath are retracted laterally, which helps in the drainage of retropharyngeal space. This is how intraoral approach and extraoral approach are used in the surgical management of retropharyngeal space infection. Now coming to the peritonsillar abscess, which is also called quinsy. This peritonsillar abscess, it is a deep neck infection which is usually secondary to the infection spread from the local site or as a complication of acute tonsillitis. It is generally a collection of pus in the peritonsillar space. So here you can see there is a swelling of the tonsils and uvular displacement, trismus along with the muffled voice. See here you can see there is a deviation of the uvula, and often that mostly the peritonsillar abscess is unilateral. Mostly it is unilateral, but sometimes it can present as bilateral peritonsillar abscess. See here in this picture there is a bilateral peritonsillar abscess. There is a mediation of uvula. This is a radiographic picture depicting the bilateral presentation of peritonsillar abscess. So usually this abscess is unilateral but can rarely occur bilaterally. So most abscesses occur in younger patients and who present with fever, sore throat and dysphagia. Surgical management usually involves a tonsillectomy 6 to 8 weeks after the formation of the abscess. So this is about the peritonsillar abscess. So this is all I wanted to discuss. So if you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know what do you think about this presentation in the comment section. So